When I first came to the South 25 or 30 years ago, I was really stunned at how so many people honestly believed that the Civil War wasn't about slavery, which it certainly was. It was quite clear that the actual losers of the war had done a wonderful job at redrafting the narrative. You could see that at reenactments where there always seemed to be more Confederates than U.S. soldiers. You could see that in paintings, which were often very Moonlight and Magnolia.
The Confederacy is one of the few examples in the history of all human time where those who lost the war got to put up monuments to themselves.
I'm from the North. I'm from Maryland. We were told about the heroes of the Civil War, namely enslaved Africans like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. I had never heard the position of the South. When I got to Tennessee, I was told about blacks who fought in the Confederate Army as if that was a justification for the war. There was a one-sided story, a romanticized story, a story that continued to not give honor to my people, a narrative that the war was not fought about slavery.
Franklin was a place that witnessed a terrible battle, but it's late in the war. The idea that somehow after Gettysburg and Vicksburg, which is only the midway point of the war, that was it, really is something we deal with to this day. It's just a lingering misconception which leads to overall misunderstandings. And so we've worked for years to try and resurrect the Franklin story.
As I have come to understand the story better, I want that fuller story for my children, for my grandchild, for my godchildren. I want them to see lives that remained hidden for too long. When you walk this ground where Americans killed Americans, when you stand on those blood-soaked floors or you watch light pour through the bullet holes, you develop a visceral understanding of the cost, the price that had to be paid so that 4 million people could finally be free.
What happens over the course of just 4 or 5 hours on November 30th, 1864, is a contest between about 40,000 men. It's a very short and very intense, incredibly brutal battle. At Carter House, you have a family who see their entire existence consumed by the battle. Their home was taken as headquarters for the U.S. Army. They lost a son during the battle. He dies literally on the ground on which he was raised. The loss is searingly personal.
At the Carter House, we take guests down into the cellar, the very room where the Carter family, where the enslaved, where some neighbors from across the street sheltered that night. One of the little Carter granddaughters says, "It was so loud, we couldn't hear ourselves scream." You have cannon on both sides of that house. You have men engaged in hand-to-hand fighting, which didn't happen very much in the Civil War, but it happened in that yard that night, and they are right in the middle of it.
For the McGavicks who lived here, they saw their home taken as a hospital, and it was filled with hundreds and hundreds of Confederate troops that night. The dead were buried literally in this family's backyard. Franklin was always important to understanding how the American Civil War ended. So you really have all three pieces of this great American experiment. You have the system that existed, which led us to war. Then you have a battle itself. And then you have a couple of decades after the war where both the people who lived here and people they once owned learn how to try and live together. It's really an incredibly unique place. I've said for years, you can't get this at any other Civil War site. And Franklin was remembered by the ground being covered up. Who put houses and strip malls and pizza places and gas stations on it? We erased history a long time ago. So it's time that we peel that back and actually talk about what we did during that war and how close we came to destroying the United States. About 20 years ago here in Franklin, there were a group of people who got together and believed that we had an opportunity to save some of the ground that was still there. And so we've come together, created one organization, the Battle of Franklin Trust, and then the Battle of Franklin Trust was instrumental in helping reclaim this ground. And so far, we've preserved or reclaimed about 150 acres. Our job is to teach. Our job is to educate. Our job is to push the boundaries about what a place like this means, why the Civil War is important, and what's happened during this 250 years of our experiment in democracy.
The way people respond is marvelous. When you watch them be moved by the story, when you tell them about a woman like Frankie who was bought in the square here in downtown Franklin with her 4-year-old son and left 2 other children on that auction block who didn't get to come here. That's powerful. And people have this deep reaction and it unsettles them enough that you can tell them other truths because now they are receptive to a truth that they didn't even know existed.
As a result of the work of Eric Jacobson and the Battle of Franklin Trust, a true new day has dawned. And I'm thankful to be a part of it because they can't tell the story alone. In spite of everything that's going on right now, Franklin, Tennessee is operating and moving in its own path to tell this fuller story.
For those who survived the war, whether they were white or black, whether they just carried bad memories, whether they were missing a limb, or whether they were freed, struggling for true equality, they were all impacted. And our purpose is to get people to reckon with the past. There's no better place to crack that nut than right where some of the biggest problems existed, right here in the South, in the heart of Tennessee.